Imagine waking up tomorrow to find your favorite European chocolate bar has doubled in price. Or that shiny new German car you've been saving for, out of reach thanks to a sudden spike in tariffs. What if I told you this isn't just a hypothetical nightmare? It's a looming reality, powered by the clash of economic titans, the United States and the European Union. Today, we stand at the edge of a precipice, with $500 billion in transatlantic trade hanging in the balance. Will diplomacy save the day, or are we about to witness the biggest trade war in a generation? Let's dive into the drama, the stakes, and the hidden players that could shape your wallet for years to come. The story of US-EU trade is a story of ambition, rivalry, and, at times, uneasy alliance. After World War II, the United States helped rebuild Europe, not just to heal wounds, but to secure new markets and counter Soviet influence. The formation of the European Economic Community laid the groundwork for what would become today's European Union, a massive, unified market rivaling America in size and technological prowess. For decades, trade between the US and EU has been the lifeblood of the global economy. Every day, roughly $3 billion worth of goods and services crosses the Atlantic. Think about it. Everything from artisanal Italian cheeses, to American tech, to luxury cars, to pharmaceuticals. Both economies have invested heavily in each other. Millions of jobs hinge on this relationship. Yet, beneath the surface, this marriage of markets has always been rocky. Disagreements over agricultural policies, food safety standards, and digital privacy have sown seeds of discord. Remember the infamous banana wars? The dispute over hormone-treated beef? Each spat left battle scars, some still tender. Fast forward to the last decade and the global stage has become even more volatile. The world watched as Brexit upended trade routes, and as digital giants like Google and Facebook clashed with European regulators over data privacy and taxes. In 2018, the Trump administration escalated tensions by slapping tariffs on EU steel and aluminum, prompting swift retaliatory measures from Brussels. Transatlantic relations soured. The US-EU Trade and Technology Council, founded in 2021, was supposed to calm the waters, yet the underlying storms never truly abated. Now, the stakes are rising again. On a tense Friday, President Trump threatened to double down, tariffs of up to 50% on EU imports, starting June 1st. Global markets reeled. European automakers shuddered. The German car industry alone faced potential annual losses exceeding $5 billion. U.S. consumers, too, watched nervously as business groups lobbied the White House, warning that tariffs are a self-inflicted wound, in the words of trade expert Simon Lester. Fears of higher prices, disrupted supply chains, and economic slowdown spread faster than breaking news. The EU didn't take the threat lightly. Ursula von der Leyen, president of the European Commission, called Trump directly. In a diplomatic ballet, she convinced him to extend the tariff deadline until July 9th, buying precious time for negotiation. "We will rapidly get together to see if we can work something out," Trump told reporters Sunday. Von der Leyen echoed the urgency, posting that the EU was ready to move quickly. But is this delay a real reprieve, or just a pause before the storm? Underneath the polite phone calls and public statements, both sides are quietly arming themselves for battle. The U.S. Trade Representative is zeroing in on digital trade and regulatory cooperation, pushing the EU to relax its strict rules. Meanwhile, the EU is actively debating its new anti-coercion instrument, a tool designed to hit back at U.S. trade pressure and, if necessary, retaliate with tariffs of its own. Behind closed doors in Berlin, French officials are urging Brussels to prepare tariffs on U.S. tech giants, signaling willingness to strike where it hurts, Silicon Valley. The European Central Bank, already wary of persistent inflation, is gaming out scenarios. What happens if U.S. tariffs trigger price spikes or even a recession in the Eurozone? Lucrezia Reichlin, a leading economist, warns, the ECB will have to carefully balance the risks of inflation and recession in responding to the trade dispute. This isn't just political theater. Real people have real stakes. German auto workers fear layoffs. American exporters see contracts slipping away. French winemakers, Italian fashion houses, Dutch tech startups all risk becoming collateral damage. U.S. farmers, already wary after years of trade battles with China, now fear losing access to some of their most lucrative European markets. The pain could radiate worldwide. Tariffs on EU goods mean higher prices for U.S. consumers, and retaliatory measures could slam American industries from agriculture to aerospace. Meanwhile, some see opportunity. The EU has begun courting new partners, particularly in Asia and South America. Negotiations with Mercosur countries, for example, could open new escape hatches from U.S. dependence. A trade war would have significant geopolitical implications, weakening the transatlantic alliance, warns Edward Alden of the Council on Foreign Relations. As the tectonic plates of global trade shift, old alliances may give way to new, unpredictable rivalries. Within the EU, fractures are emerging. France pushes for a tough stance, but countries like Ireland and the Netherlands worry about damaging vital export markets. Germany, with its massive car exports and intricate supply chains, stands at the front lines. Every extra day of uncertainty brings fresh anxiety. Will key sectors survive another round of economic crossfire? On the American side, the chorus of opposition rises. Business groups plead for restraint, citing rising costs and the risk of derailing post-pandemic recovery. Yet the administration sees tariffs as leverage. The U.S. is using tariffs as a negotiating tactic, but it's a risky strategy that could backfire, says Jeffrey Schott from the Peterson Institute for International Economics. The gamble? That the EU will blink first. The risk? That both sides tumble into a spiral neither can control. The UK, no longer an EU member but still deeply intertwined with both economies, watches with growing alarm. British officials float the idea of mediating, desperate to avoid a full-blown trade war that could devastate an already fragile post-Brexit recovery. So, what happens next? In the coming weeks, negotiators will scramble to craft a deal before July 9th. Will they find a compromise on digital taxes, regulatory standards, and agricultural subsidies, or will the deadline pass and tariffs hit with full force? Chad Bown of the Peterson Institute puts it bluntly. The delay offers a window for serious negotiations, but the fundamental disagreements remain. And here's where the real danger lies. While world leaders posture and diplomats haggle, the economic clock keeps ticking. Supply chains can't wait. Markets crave stability. For every day that passes without resolution, uncertainty grows, and with it, the risk that a single misstep plunges both economies into chaos. Are we headed for a narrow deal that keeps trade flowing, or will political pride and economic nationalism tip the scales toward all-out conflict? What about the hidden cards both sides still hold? As July 9th approaches, the world waits, wallets clutched, to see if cooler heads will prevail, or if the global economy is about to learn a hard lesson about the true cost of tariff wars. But just before we look at the secret negotiations, the technological battlegrounds, and the what-if scenarios that could reshape the world's economic order, let's ask, can decades of partnership survive this latest test? Or is the US-EU relationship about to break in ways that will shock us all? As we stand on the brink of the July 9th deadline, the world is watching. This is more than a diplomatic standoff. It's a test of the very foundations of the global economy. But what happens next? The stakes could not be higher, and the choices made in these next few weeks could ripple for years to come. Let's look at the possible futures that await us, and the consequences they bring. Picture the first and most hopeful scenario. The US and EU, after all the posturing and late-night negotiations, reach a limited trade agreement. Maybe they focus on specific areas like digital trade or regulatory cooperation. This would require real compromise from both sides, painful but constructive. If they pull it off, we could see tariffs reduced or scrapped outright, smoother trade in tech and services, and renewed faith in transatlantic cooperation. Remember, these two regions combined make up nearly half of global GDP. Even a modest deal would send a powerful signal to global markets. Pragmatism can win over politics. As Chad Bown of the Peterson Institute for International Economics says, the delay offers a window for serious negotiations, but the fundamental disagreements remain. But what if compromise proves impossible? Here's scenario 2, a slide into a full-scale trade war. Tariffs hit 50%. The EU retaliates, likely targeting US tech giants and agriculture. German automakers, often called the backbone of European industry, get hammered, facing billions in new costs and shrinking exports. American consumers see price hikes on everything from wine and cheese to cars and electronics. Supply chains seize up. Small businesses struggle to keep up with rising costs. The ECB scrambles to fight inflation while staving off a recession. The world's two economic superpowers drift further apart. Simon Lester of the Cato Institute doesn't mince words. Tariffs are a self-inflicted wound that will harm consumers and businesses on both sides of the Atlantic. And the pain wouldn't stop at pocketbooks or stock markets. There's a geopolitical dimension too. As Edward Alden from the Council on Foreign Relations warns, A trade war would have significant geopolitical implications, weakening the transatlantic alliance. That alliance has held firm for generations, underpinning the international order. Its unraveling could embolden rivals like China, splinter the West, and throw the global rulebook into chaos. But there's a third path, less dramatic but potentially just as transformative. What if the EU, tired of brinkmanship, pivots away from dependence on the US and starts looking east and south, seeking new trade deals with Asia, Latin America, and even China? We're already seeing signals. Europe is reopening talks with Mercosur, and new agreements with Asian partners are on the table. This realignment wouldn't happen overnight, but over time, it could shift the center of gravity in global trade. The US might wake up to find itself less indispensable, its leverage diminished, and European exporters, from French winemakers to Spanish machine tool makers, could find fresh opportunities in booming new markets. It's a risky bet, but as Hosukli Makiyama argues, the EU needs to be prepared to walk away from the table if the US demands are unreasonable. What about the rest of the world? Allies like the UK are watching nervously, some even offering to mediate. Emerging markets could seize the moment to deepen partnerships with Europe. And China, often cast as both rival and partner, would see new openings to expand its influence. The irony is that protectionism, meant to shield domestic interests, could end up isolating economies and triggering a race to the bottom, higher prices, slower growth, and greater instability for everyone. But let's bring this closer to home. What does all this mean for you, whether you're a business owner, worker, investor, student, or even just a consumer who shops for imported goods? First, prepare for volatility. If you're invested in stocks, especially in sectors like autos, agriculture, or technology, keep an eye on news out of Brussels and Washington. Even a tweet can move markets. Hedging, diversification, and close attention to supply chain risks could help protect your portfolio. Second, for businesses that rely on transatlantic trade, whether importing German machinery or exporting software to Europe, this is the time to review contracts, explore contingency partners, and build in flexibility. Don't wait for policymakers to resolve things at the last moment. The brutal lesson of recent history is that trade wars have real, immediate impacts, and agility can spell the difference between survival and disaster. And if you're a consumer, brace yourself for potential price hikes. Many of the goods we take for granted, cars, electronics, cheese, even cosmetics, are part of intricate global supply chains. Tariffs act like a stealth tax, inflating prices, shrinking choices, and sometimes costing jobs. It's not just an abstract debate in far-off capitals. It's something you'll see in the checkout line. There's also a lesson here about the power and limits of political rhetoric. It's tempting to see tough talk and threats as strength, but as Jeffrey Schott of the Peterson Institute cautions, the U.S. is using tariffs as a negotiating tactic, but it's a risky strategy that could backfire. So what can ordinary people do? Stay informed. Don't tune out trade policy as something just for experts or politicians. Take an interest in where your goods come from. Support organizations and coalitions that advocate for fair, open trade. And don't underestimate the power of public opinion. Studies show that vocal opposition from consumers and businesses can and does influence policymakers. History shows that moments of crisis in trade relations often produce new institutions and rules. After World War II, the US and Europe laid the groundwork for the economic system that has fueled decades of growth. Now, we face another crossroads. The choices made by leaders on both sides of the Atlantic will shape not just their own economies but the direction of globalization itself. There's also another practical reality. The new global economy is built on digital flows, data transfers, and services, areas where regulation is often unclear and contested. The US and EU must find common ground on everything from data privacy to digital taxes. Failure to do so risks not only economic fallout, but the balkanization of the internet and the digital economy. As negotiations continue, keep an eye on the new players at the table. The US Trade Representative is pushing hard on digital trade issues. France is leading the charge for tougher regulations on American tech, and Germany's automakers are quietly lobbying both sides to avoid disaster. Meanwhile, backroom talks in London, Brussels, and Washington are as heated as ever. So what does the future hold? Let's return to our original question. Will a deal avert disaster, or are we headed for a seismic split in the transatlantic relationship? Here's what's most likely. Both sides recognize what's at stake. The risks of a full-blown trade war are simply too great, for workers, for businesses, and for global stability. Expect a last-minute scramble, with diplomats working around the clock, and a deal that is less than perfect but averts the worst. The agreement may be narrow, focusing on key sectors and buying time for deeper negotiations. Some tariffs might remain, but the doomsday scenario, a trade war spiraling out of control, will likely be avoided, at least for now. But don't be fooled. Even if disaster is averted, the underlying tensions aren't going away. Trade disputes are becoming more frequent and more public. The old playbook is out of date. Both sides must work hard to rebuild trust and adapt to a changing world, one where technology, politics, and new alliances continually reshape the landscape. And here's a secret fact you might not have heard. Behind the scenes, the European Central Bank has quietly begun contingency planning for a trade war scenario, not just in spreadsheets and forecasts, but with draft emergency measures to stabilize the euro and support banks if markets panic. That level of preparation shows just how seriously the risks are being taken, even if politicians keep smiling for the cameras. So, as the clock ticks down to July 9th, remember, these are not just abstract battles between governments. They're struggles over the future of jobs, technology, and economic security. The outcome will touch everyone. If you found this deep dive helpful, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss our ongoing coverage of global economic flashpoints. Share your thoughts below. Will we see a breakthrough, or is this only the beginning of